What is it? What is it about humanity that it wants to go to all the details and stuff and listen? You know, these guys like Fauci get up there and start talking. You know, he doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on the bottom. You know, those guys have got an agenda, which is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. They've got a personal kind of agenda. They make up their own rules as they go. They change them when they want to, and they smugly, like Tony Fauci, does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera. You can't expect the sheep to really respect the best and the brightest. They don't know the difference, really. I mean, I like humans. Don't get me wrong, but basically, the vast majority of them do not possess the ability to judge who is and who isn't a really good scientist. I mean, that's a problem. That's a main problem, actually, with science, I'd say, in this century, because science is being judged by people. Funding is being done by people who don't understand it. Okay, who do we trust? Fauci? Fauci doesn't know enough to, you know. If Fauci wants to get on television with somebody who knows a little bit about this stuff and debate him, he could easily do it, because he's been asked. I mean, I've had a lot of people, president of the University of South Carolina asked Fauci if he'd come down there and debate me on the stage in front of the student body, because I wanted somebody who was from the other side to come down there and balance my, because I felt like, well, these guys can listen to me, but I need to have somebody else down here that's going to tell me the other side. But Fauci didn't want to do it.
Hello, my friends. So today I just want to discuss the clip that I just showed you, which is a clip of a man named Kary Mullis, who was the inventor of the PCR test, the famous, infamous PCR test that has been used and abused in this age of COVID to allegedly diagnose infections of COVID. And Mullis was the recipient of a Nobel Prize. He was a brilliant scientist by all accounts. And in this clip, I think you can see the disdain, the contempt, the criticisms that he might have had for everything that's going on in this whole COVID-19 pandemic. And it's unfortunate, very unfortunate in my opinion, that he died mere months before the outbreak of this pandemic. He died in August of 2019. Rest in peace, Kary Mullis. And, you know, this guy who was the inventor of the PCR test said straight up that his PCR tests cannot tell you if someone is sick. So you have that. I think you would have been extremely critical of how the PCR tests have been used in this whole time of COVID to allegedly diagnose whether people are infected with COVID. But he is also, as you could see in the clip that I showed you, a big-time critic of Dr. Anthony Fauci, who has become the official science guru of the United States government. I mean, he's achieved such a level of omniscience to the media and to the government that, you know, I was watching CNN this morning, and one thing that a commentator said was something like, "Oh, when is Joe Biden going to get the vaccine? He said that once it's been determined to be safe and effective, once Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci tells us that it is safe and effective, then he would take the vaccine. So when is Biden going to take this vaccine?" So Fauci has become this guru, this arbiter of scientific truth. And if he says that something is safe and effective, then by golly, it's safe and effective. But as you could see from Mullis, his opinion is that Fauci doesn't know anything about anything, and that he would say that to his face, and you could just, the contempt, the disdain that he has for Fauci is just palpable in his tone and the way that he speaks of him. So that, I think, is interesting, and I wish that he was around for this whole pandemic. It would have been great to see what his thoughts were on it, the way what he would have said about it. But one interesting thing that I want to discuss is, what does he mean by Fauci being an administrative type, as opposed to a scientific or even a philosophical type of person? What does it mean to be an administrative type of person? So I think the administrative type of person has their main concern in bureaucratic application of procedures, concepts, and policies that are given to them from a higher authority. They're not interested in discovering the truth, in understanding the underlying concepts and mechanisms of things. Their main concern is not health or scientific truth or whatever it may be. Their main concern is the career of managing people, managing business enterprises or government bureaucracies, memorizing concepts, memorizing policies and procedures, and making sure that those policies and procedures are in effect, rather than actually creating those policies or thinking critically about the policies and procedures. They're just there to memorize them and put them into effect. And this really is the kind of person that I think the university system in general, the academic system in general, is creating. You don't need a lick of creative or critical thinking skills to get to even the highest levels of academia. The furthest extent to which you will apply creative and critical thinking is in something like, apply this general concept that we've taught you to a new context. Apply something like critical theory. How can you find racism, sexism, homophobia, whatever, in a new context, like this literature or this piece of media? Or things like, apply the thinking of one philosopher to a different philosopher. That's the extent to which you need critical or creative thinking in the academic system today. Apart from that, you're just memorizing facts, memorizing concepts, and applying them in various contexts. That's all you need. Those administrative skills are all you need to get to the highest level. And, I knew a lot of people in high school and in college who were not very bright. They were not interested, generally, in understanding the underlying concepts, the basics, the fundamentals of the fields in which they were studying. What they were interested in was mainly social things, and when it came to their academic pursuits, the way in which they succeeded was just pure, rote memorization and repetition, and mechanical sort of ingesting of the facts, the concepts, the procedures that they were told, and through just repetition and rote memorization, learning to apply those to whatever context they needed to apply them. They were not generally interested. I mean, to some extent they were interested, but for the most part, the only way they succeeded was just hitting the books and studying, and learning how to apply the concepts that were given to them to whatever context was necessary. They weren't really passionate about the fields of study that they were involved in, typically. So I think, that's something that when people talk about, oh, do doctors have to be paid off? How many people have to be in on the lie for a conspiracy to work? Not many people, because for the most part, the majority of people who are out there in these professional positions, even doctors, even healthcare workers, are these administrative types of people who aren't there to question. They're not there to think creatively or critically. The way they think is memorizing what the authorities have told them, memorizing what's accepted, memorizing the consensus, and then applying whatever they've memorized. They're not there to question. They're not there to be critical. So you don't need that many people who are in on the conspiracy if you have them at the top of the authorities. If you have them at the top of the food chain, because everything that follows down from them is just there to accept what the authority tells them. They're not the questioning type of person. They're the memorize and apply type of person. And that brings me to the second point that Mullis makes, is that most people cannot tell the difference between the truly creative, critical, scientific-minded person and this type of administrative person. All they look for are the credentials. They look for the badge. They look for the seal of approval. They look for the authority, whatever symbol of authority is there to tell people what is and isn't accepted. And the majority of people who are making decisions, scientific decisions and scientific policies, the majority of those people are not real scientists. The funding doesn't come from real scientists. The funding comes from you-know-whos with political agendas. So, unfortunately, the vast majority of people cannot tell the difference, and they have to go by these social cues, these signs and symbols of authority. And that obviously presents a major problem. And this, by the way, is something that I discussed a little bit with the Guard of Doom, a friend of mine by the name of Doom Guard, who has a channel on BitChute, where we had about an hour and a half long conversation the other day. That will be up soon, so you should go check that out if you have time. Once it's uploaded, I'll link it on my Twitter, and I'll link it. I'll share it here on YouTube's sharing feature. So go check that out. But yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that clip. I think it's a really interesting clip. The two main points are that, there's an administrative type of person that is really the type that is created by these academic systems, that is allowed to rise to the top of these bureaucracies, of these institutions, of these stuff like the CDC, the World Health Organization, these sorts of institutions, and that the average person is incapable of telling the difference between a truly scientific-minded person and one of these bureaucratic administrative types of people. And that's how we end up with a situation like today with COVID, I think. There's so much just misinformation and misunderstandings, and the average person just has no ability to parse between what's really scientific and what's not. And this is actually something that, as a final point, the extent of the critical thinking that we're taught in universities is how to do things like checking the authoritative, whether a source is authoritative or not. Whether a source is good, we're taught, depends on how accepted and authoritative that source is. People are not taught how to evaluate ideas on their own merits, or how to evaluate conclusions or results of experiments on the merits of that experiment. What they're taught is how to determine whether or not the people that are giving them that information are truly experts and authorities. And what they mean by that is how close they are to the government, how close they are to these accepted organizations that tell us the truth about things. So, yeah, and Mullis knew it. Mullis was talking about that in his video here, and I think that, you know, it's a lesson for us all to keep in mind. And yeah, I wish he was around for these times. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching.